The rainy season is upon us, and like every other year, it looks like Lagos is back to its flooding days. Monday's rain brought parts of Lagos to a halt as flash floods disrupted movement, submerged roads, and left residents stranded for hours. The heavy rainfall, which began overnight, affected both the island and mainland areas, crippling businesses, activities, and causing severe traffic congestion. Residents expressed frustration over the recurring flood problems, accusing the state government of inaction despite repeated complaints. Few took to social media to share videos of their flooded roads, homes, and cars.
Well, in response, the Commissioner for the Environment and Water Resources, Tokunbo Wahab, has called for calm, stating that Lagos had resilient systems in place to manage flash floods, though the volume of rain could temporarily overwhelm the drainage infrastructure. He attributed the flooding to the coastal nature of Lagos and the impact of tidal lock, which hinders drainage during heavy rains. Meanwhile, Nigeria's meteorological agency, Lament, has warned of a 3-day widespread thunderstorm and heavy rain across the country, which began yesterday. Joining us now is respected and international environmentalist, Mr. Desmond Majekodunmi, joins us this morning. Welcome to Breakfast Central.
Thank you.
Let's start off first with the rains. It's not been palatable as some people couldn't go to work yesterday. Some are still nursing the pain that came from having a flooded home or house. You've talked about how we should manage the environment. Can you narrow down to what the peculiarity is with Lagos State and its drainages always getting flooded, what the environment is telling us, most importantly, especially with this one-day heavy downpour?
Yes, well, these heavy downpours are now being reclassified by the Secretary General of the United Nations as rain bombs. Oh, yes. He said the reason why they're reclassifying them as rain bombs is because the volume of rain that is falling at certain times far exceeds the normal expectation and far exceeds what we have been used to, simply because there's far more water vapor in the atmosphere, and that water vapor is eventually going to fall as rain. So we're getting these rain bombs. And, you know, the typical example is what happened in Mokwa, I think it was just last month. Yes, rain that would normally fall over a period of 6 months fell within 6 hours. And this has been happening in other parts of the world. Yes, it happened in Texas, similar kind of thing. The one that fell in Valencia, Spain, was even worse than that. 1 year's rain in 8 hours. Boom! It overwhelms everything and anything. And what we experienced in Lagos was a small rain bomb. There are bigger ones than that, as we've already seen. And this overwhelms whatever natural systems are there. It overwhelms whatever divine developed systems that we put in place. Like the Commissioner of the Environment said, if you have water that is a bit high, because you know the tides go up and down. The ocean rises and then it goes down a bit. And this, of course, affects the lagoon tides as well. So when the water wants to evacuate after the rainfall, if the tide is high, the evacuation will be very, very slow. And this is basically what happened to our dear Lagos, who, by the way, is one of the more vulnerable places in the whole world to climate change. But what we're seeing is the classic example of climate change manifesting itself. And what is climate change? Basically, it's nature fighting back. Because one thing about Mother Nature, whatever you give her, she's going to give you right back. And that's what's happening to us right here in Nigeria, right here in Lagos.
Now, talking about Mother Nature, you did talk about the rain bombs, and I mean, this is an act of nature. We really can't do a lot to stop it. But the Lagos state government officials often cite coastal geography and tidal lock as excuses, but to what extent has unregulated construction, sand filling of wetlands and drainage encroachment exacerbated what might have been otherwise manageable natural risks?
Excellent question. Because even prior to the rain bombs, just, the regular heavy rainfall, we noticed that we're getting a lot more of this flooding happening in Lagos. Because mainly we have been impacting on nature's system. The reality is that this planet, this wonderful tiny blue marble in space, and that's all she is, a miraculously developed little blue marble, has perfect systems for maintaining her equilibrium. And one of those many, many systems is right here in Lagos with our mangroves. The Lagos areas, especially around the Lekki, the Peninsula area, and parts of Badagry and certain other areas, we have mangroves, this mangrove swamp. And these mangroves have this wonderful ability to absorb a lot of the excessive rain, because you always have, at certain times, heavy rain, not so heavy rain, and that's obviously what's been happening in the past. And one of the reasons why we didn't have too much flooding is because nature was allowed to do her work, to absorb the rain in the mangroves, and then they now release the water a bit more slowly through the root zone, through the transvaporation, the leaves and all that. And in the process, even helps to purify the water and also provide a place for aquatic fauna to thrive. That is, the crabs and the snails and even a lot of the fish would come to the mangroves of Lagos to breed. But what have we been doing? Human beings, with our technology, we have to develop. And unbridled development has been one of the major causes of the kind of tragic consequences that we've been experiencing in Lagos. Development that was not even approved, development that certainly should not have been approved if it was. The audacity of thinking, this is development, we must take over this land and make some big money from it and don't sand fill the whole place, and meanwhile you're causing chaos with nature's system. Yes, this is one of the major issues. But now, because it's no longer just a normal rainfall, we're going to get the occasional rain bombs. The consequences of this are going to be far, far worse. And there's just no justification for doing this kind of thing. How can you be just unbridled sand filling of mangrove areas? We've been fighting against this for quite some time, but now nature is joining the battle. And believe you me, we cannot win against Mother Nature. Let me ask you all a question there. In that studio, would any of you think of slapping your mother?
That's absolutely impossible. I mean, you've talked about us not being able to win a war against Mother Nature. So maybe is it time for us here to declare some form of a climate emergency and maybe get some support, global funding and support to be able to deal with the after effects that climate change might bring or is bringing in the form of these rain bombs that result in flash flooding and the likes?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, the timing of that question is very, very relevant, because the reality is that a lot of this problem that's causing the excessive rain that has been classified as rain bomb, a lot of it was not caused by us. It wasn't we in Nigeria, it wasn't we in Africa who contributed the vast amounts of the greenhouse trapping gas. That is the gas there that traps the heat. We call it the greenhouse gas, mainly the carbon dioxide. It wasn't us. It was the industrialized nations that have been causing this for the last 150 years. Well, we have now joined in, but not nearly to their extent. But a lot of us on the African continent, especially the West African continent, we're very vulnerable to the results of this. Coastal erosion is a terrible thing that's happening to all of us along our coast, again, because the oceans are hotter now, they're warmer. And so when you heat water, it expands. So the oceans are rising and they're becoming more sort of violent in terms of the wave movement, which is causing erosion. However, if Nigeria, as the giant of Africa, can come together with our African brothers, especially along the West Coast, come together and speak with one voice of unity at the forthcoming conferences. There's one coming in November in Brazil. It's called the COP conference. They have this every year, and it's very well attended by the heads of state of most governments. And once we can come together and make a very polite but very firm demand for funds that should be forthcoming for us to be able to adapt to the problem that has been caused by the industrialized nations, and also to mitigate, we stand a good chance of getting some of those funds to come and help us. However, one of the things that's standing against us is that they've been saying for the last few years, because we've been making this demand, that, okay, well, if the money comes, where will it go?
And that's a good area. You know, that's a good area for us to probe. I want us to probe deeper into the past COP that we've had and the impact that it's had so far. But we're going on a very quick break. And when we come back, that's an area we'll be exploring. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Breakfast Central. We're still looking at the latest rain bombs that have hit different parts in Lagos and have resulted in floods that have unfortunately affected houses, cars, and individuals alike. We're joined this morning by environmentalist, Mr. Desmond Majekodunmi. Thank you very much for staying with us. Before we went on the break, I had asked you about if it's time for us to declare a climate emergency that would require us to get funding, global funding, to be able to combat the effects of climate change. And you said a very affirmative yes, stating exactly, especially the COP that's coming forward in November, and if we all can lend our voices to ensure that we take a very strong stand against climate change. However, in the past years, we've seen some criticism leveled against COP, particularly the fact that many have said it's more performative and it hasn't given Africa a chance to be able to, get some form of protection, and it feels very, very, checkbox, ticking checkbox lists, ticking things off a checkbox, I beg your pardon. So how would you rate the past COPs that have happened, the impact it's had on Nigeria? And if you think that maybe Africa should create its own platform where African leaders can come into the room and generate homegrown solutions for an unfortunate problem that we contribute the least to, but we feel the effects the most.
Yeah, it's the whole COP thing. It's quite complex, and it's a reflection of where humanity has been for centuries upon centuries, and without the COP, things would definitely be a lot worse. It could be a lot better. Just like without the mother organization behind COP, the United Nations, things would definitely be a lot worse. In fact, without the United Nations coming into place after the Second World War from the League of Nations, probably we would have experienced massive nuclear semi-annihilation. It was the United Nations that was able to really, really bring down the firm gates against the proliferation of the nuclear armaments by giving an expression called MAD, mutually assured destruction. And this also applies to what's going on with climate change. Because if we continue this way, we will not be able to stop the process of the degradation that is going on with the environment. We call it environment, but what is it really? It is our life support system. And it's a miraculously, perfectly balanced life support system that works intrinsically in harmony with itself. It's a miraculous system. I mean, if you just look at the various amounts of gases that are there in the atmosphere, which, by the way, is a very, very thin little layer. The thickness of our atmosphere, it can be sort of analogous to the thickness of the skin of an apple. that thin little layer of gases, very, very different types of gases, but they're in specific ratios, including the CO2 that we had referred to a bit earlier. This is what makes this planet the only habitable planet that we have come across amongst the millions that we've been able to observe. A very special place indeed. So the COP conference, it started some time back now. And it started because the scientists were able to appreciate the fact that we are messing up this incredible atmospheric gas combination, and it is causing problems. And a lot of talking as usual, because the people that are coming there, they're still driven by personal interests. They're still driven by, me, even if you want to expand it, my nation. But remember, these are the leaders of the nation, and a lot of them are there for personal interest, which is what has caused the problem in the first place. In the first place. Otherwise, how else will we justify continuing going down this road of massive pollution of the atmosphere, of emitting these types of gases that are causing these terrible, terrible problems? Just the gas alone that comes from burning fossil fuel, it's a dirty gas.
Now,
if I brought a little generator into that studio, you wouldn't allow me to turn it on, would you?
Now, Mr. Majekodunmi, I mean, critics of COPs will say it's just a talk shop. But let's talk solutions. Are there global models of coastal megacities, let's say Jakarta in Indonesia, Mumbai, or even New York, that Lagos can look to for integrated flood management? And crucially, do we have institutional will to apply those lessons here? Are we stuck in a cycle of performative crisis management?
Excellent observation and great question. Yeah, it's a lot of talk. Don't you know, blah, 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 hot air. There's so much hot air that comes out of the COP, which is similar to the kind of hot air that you get out of so many of the parliamentary delegations, you know, when they hit in their various houses of assembly. Yeah, they are global cities that you could learn a little bit from. You know, Amsterdam, New York, Dubai has tried, although the conditions offshore are a little bit different. And what we need to do, we've already showed that we can't do it with the Eco-Atlantic. It's a massively expensive intervention, bringing, you know, millions of dollars worth of giant boulders and stacking them on. But it can help, and it needs to be done. It needs to be done. Because, you know, the climate change is not going to go away. And it certainly won't go away if we're just doing this talking. But the reality is beginning to sink in, especially to the young people, because it's their future that is at stake. And also there's a few of the elders within the system, like the Secretary General of the United Nations. He appreciates the gravity of the situation, which is why in the 2015 COP, he told them, he said that mankind is waging war against nature, and this is suicidal, okay? And as a result of this, and this shows the type of leadership that so many of the countries in the world are unfortunately subjected to, because as a result of that 2015 COP in Paris, the leaders, including our own president at that time, signed a treaty to reduce the CO2 emissions. They all agreed, you have to reduce it. We can't be on this suicidal march. And there's a reason why he said it was a suicidal march. Because there's a point of no return. If you continue breaking down these systems, eventually you won't be able to stop them from the continuation of their breakdown. Because these systems are natural systems that will sequester the CO2. But you break the ability for them to do that. And it triggers off all kinds of terrible, terrible conditions that become unstoppable, and that unstoppability is in about 10 or 15 years. Anyway, at that 2015 COP, they all signed, we're going to reduce it, Signed, though, not just talking this time. Signed and agreed. By 2024, because they have this COP every year, the Secretary General of the United Nations, who had said at that time that this is a crisis, he came to the COP and he said, ladies and gentlemen, it's no longer a crisis. Everybody was there. He shouted at them. He said it's an emergency because this treaty that you all ratified, this treaty that you all signed, including our own president, to reduce the CO2, it has never been so high in the thousands of years that we've been able to assess from geographic samples, geological samples. And by the way, the average temperature of our planet has never been so high since measurements were taken in 2024. It had never been so high, and that was right on the back of 2023. And what was causing global warming was the pollution that we have all agreed to reduce. So it's not just a talk show, but it's an exposure of the hypocrisy and the lack of caring and the total sort of addiction to sense gratification or pride and so on of so much of our global leadership, which has to change. And the young people are going to rise up and demand that this change comes about, because what are we doing? We're impacting on their very life support system, which if we continue much longer, will have unstoppable and catastrophic consequences. So at least the talking has started, you know, even though it hasn't availed much, and at least they're making some sort of commitments, even though they're not sticking to those commitments. But if the media organizations like you people who are exposing the truth, who are exposing reality, if the media can come strongly behind it and not allow themselves to be coerced or be dissuaded, we're going to have to be brave about this, because what are we doing? We're fighting for our children's life. We're fighting for it, and we've already seen some of the terrible catastrophes, the awful things that these rain bombs can cause. What of children that were swept away in Mokwa? How do you think it feels to see your child being swept out of your window by a flood? The same thing happened in Texas. The same thing happened in Valencia, Spain. But the silver lining on this very, very dark cloud, and it's a bright silver lining, is that it's going to bring humanity together, especially if the media organizations can stand firm and stand brave and bring out the reality and the truth of this matter and expose it to our population. We shall make the necessary changes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Desmond Majekodunmi, for your insights on this very important subject. We do appreciate the time you spent with us here on Breakfast Central this morning. Thank you.